to understand consciousness as being itself, as quality or presence. Some people would call this idealism. I don't object to the term idealism in general, but I do think it would contribute to a misunderstanding of what I'm trying to say anyway. Consciousness would be the being, the quality, or the presence of the shared world, right? So you don't have consciousness as internal stuff. Consciousness is not the contents of a subject understood to be the container. So I think my view is pretty close to Sartre's view in the way I understand the ontological difference, and some of Heidegger's early work is also very close to say that consciousness is original or primordial time. This is very close, I think, to Sartre's understanding of consciousness. Consciousness as a kind of nothingness in which things appear. This is a bit of a spatial metaphor, time is spatialized, but consciousness is no thing, the presence or there-ness of things. Now, in existential terms, ethical terms, worldview terms, this issue is somewhat dry and technical, but I think it is maybe the theoretical issue, or it's the issue that is often left unclarified. I would say it's the sort of mess that's left on the kitchen counter. So more than once I've Googled Mach and Heidegger to see if other people made the same kind of interpretation, you might say, of the ontological difference as I do, and as I think Heidegger does, more or less explicitly, in, for instance, the famous lecture that he gave to the Marsburg theologians, when he says, Dasein is time, am I my time? So people would call this idealist. Husserl's, some of the stuff that Husserl says is very correlationist. The idea of a kind of absolute reality is a round square, basically nonsense. And I agree with that. I agree with the spirit of that remark. Husserl's use of consciousness, I think it at least gets associated with the container subject. And I think if you talk about the transcendental ego as a kind of hidden source, then you're kind of falling back into transcendent metaphysics, right? You're basically projecting something beyond experience. So Sartre, in his early essay or book, The Transcendence of the Ego. So the ego is transcendent, and he means that in the phenomenological sense, that the ego, the flesh and blood subject, is one more present entity, right? And so consciousness is a kind of pure spontaneity, a torrent of naked reality. So this torrent, this fountain of spontaneous consciousness, it's the presencing of the world from the point of view of the organism that is understood to be conscious. So what is the bad vibe that people get from what they call idealism? So you might say that it kind of relativizes the scientific image. You might say it defeats the theory of a projected true reality. There are many motives for this, right? Some are just a genuine theoretical investment in the theory of, a true world that causes internal representation. But Sartre and Heidegger, Husserl, Kant, all of these people had a kind of investment in a role in the world, right? They had political affiliations, they had religious affiliations. And this is what tends to steer the issue into, something you might call culture war. So idealism is often associated with religious thought. So I've been thinking about this issue for 2 years, and I've looked into thinkers like Mach, Avenarius, A.J. Ayer, J.S. Mill, decidedly secular thinkers who aren't much mentioned with respect to this issue. Now, this is speculation, but it's hard for me not to think about what you might call the spirit of the age, of presentism, of what is considered acceptable in the public discourse. You might say our professional philosophers working in academia, is it a very bold thing, possibly embarrassing, to defend a view that could be called idealism? Now, of course, one does not make a case for this so-called idealism just by pointing out that it might be unpopular. Many things are unpopular for a good reason. But I do think there's a theoretical strength to the case. And because I believe that, I then ask myself, well, why is not much being said about this central theoretical issue? So, you have people like Chalmers, who raises the issue and talks about a hard problem. But as far as I can make out, Chalmers is what I would call a dualist, right? So if you just take for granted that there's this meaningfully articulated true or physical reality, and then ask yourself, well, what is this other stuff? This stuff we call experience. It has these qualia. That's what some people postulate. I don't really like the idea of qualia. But you see, from my point of view, people are accepting the being of the physical as unproblematic. Now, to me, this is weird because physical empirical objects are given, you might say given to or through the sense organs, and they are manifest to me or you. In this manifestation or presence, that's what I'm calling consciousness. So in some sense, I'm actually not so far from some of the those who want to eliminate consciousness, who say that consciousness is no thing, no stuff. And I agree with that. Like William James, I agree with that. But then maybe some of these thinkers would take the physical to have some trivial and obvious kind of being. So they're not really addressing the problem of consciousness at all. You might say that they're opposed to a dualism that I also reject, but they're not acknowledging what you might call the presence or the quality of these physical things. And to me, Husserl's pretty decisive. You can check this for yourself. When you look at an ordinary object in space, you see one side of it or another. So you don't need a complicated machinery of the subject. The ordinary manifestation or presencing of physical objects in space is in terms of aspects. And, it's only in terms of these aspects that we can devise very, very impressive physical theories. You can do the math with this linear algebra, and there's no privileged point of view, and this is brilliant. You can sort of move around the virtual coordinate system, right? This kind of abstracted perceiver, and then you can express these laws so that they're independent of the place of perception. But these laws, they make predictions, they're tested, and when scientists look at these experiments, when they read the measurements, then you have material physical reality manifesting in a concrete way, showing this face or that face. Now, I actually like this very safe, minimal approach. You could say consciousness is the presence or the quality of the physical, which is to say that consciousness is the being of the physical, of objects that are in the world we share. Now, what could confuse people is this tendency to think of consciousness as an internal representational stuff, right? So I think Chalmers, he would fall into what I would call this mistake, that consciousness is some kind of stuff that's opposed to public stuff, right? And this would be connected to the taken for granted boundary between an inside and an outside. And this you might trace back to humans keeping secrets, or humans doing things that other humans don't understand. So the deed was there for the sense organs, but the motive is obscure, is debatable. But one could approach this issue by focusing on the being of the physical, even though we're interested in more than that. As a rhetorical strategy, you could try to zero in on some very contested territory. So I've called it the hard problem of the physical, which to me is a naivety about the concept of the physical. Personally, I'm an atheist, not even an agnostic. To me that word is a little too soft. I'm an atheist like Freud or like Sartre. So to me, this issue isn't a kind of wedge where I try to, open the door and then I'm going to bring in religious beliefs. While I differ with Graham Harman in some important ways, I think he's really good on this issue that materialism is a kind of accidental idealism after all. Now, as far as I understand him, he thinks that the true object never shows itself. He's a kind of twist on Kant, right? The mathematical, physical mathematical stuff, content that we project on objects, for him would be another kind of image. It would be another surface of the object, but the object is beneath every surface. Now, I can't follow him there. I've called myself a phenomenalist. Wittgenstein, in his notebooks, he says experience is world and does not need the subject. To me, this is very close to Sartre's view in the transcendence of the ego. But what Harman says about Husserl is great, and I agree with both of them. Or I agree with Harman's understanding of Husserl. So the object, every manifestation of the object, while you can thematize it as a manifestation and then call it a perception, but in ordinary commerce with the world, the adumbration of the object, it sort of carries the identity of the object with it. So I can see something peripherally, or I can see something without much light. I can see it in less than ideal conditions and still recognize it as the object. So as I walk around the tree and see it from different sides, and it shows me different faces, I am continually seeing that tree. A colorblind person walking around that tree with me is also seeing that tree, but lacking some dimension of its colorful manifestation. Some channel is not available to that colorblind person, and that's why we call them colorblind. But I should say that there's a kind of behavioristic point to be made here. We establish colorblindness with various tests. I can't see the tree through the eyes of the person that is colorblind. So this is an interesting tension, right? It connects to the inverted spectrum idea, like what if what I call red, you call green, but we still call the same objects by the correct or common color names. So it seems to me that I can't see things through your eyes, and you can't see things through mine. Now, some people believe in clairvoyance. I don't. My point is, though, I don't think philosophy has, these absolute axioms. To me, it's an explicative endeavor that tries to work from experience or belief that is understood to be shared by most people, right? You might say that there are going to be exclusions, right? Like people who believe in clairvoyance or divine messengers bringing them golden tablets. You might say that they might not fit into this explicative philosophy. That explicative philosophy it makes assumptions, at least implicitly, about its readers, right? There's people that you would bring your ideas to in the hope that they could find them valuable, that they could understand the case you make for them. But we don't have axioms, right? We're not doing geometry. So for me anyway, explicative philosophy remains tentative. Now you can develop a strong belief in some explication, like I feel pretty good about my theory, or I wouldn't bother making recordings about it. But it's not geometry, right? It's not a formal axiomatic system. So I tend to see this kind of explication. It's often demystifying. So I would read John Stuart Mill, for instance. He demystifies matter with his phenomenalism. He explicates. He says, well, as I see it, what do people mean by physical things when they say that something is real in that informal sense that is largely associated with public access to the so-called real object? In public access, this is the key phrase. I think Mill's explication is correct. As practical creatures, we depend on the functioning and the reliable presence of, foodstuffs, tools. We build our lives around certain continuities in experience, regularities in the availability of things. It's interesting, Berkeley, he's, I guess, the first great immaterialist, the first bubble popper. Now, he was motivated. His motives weren't good in a certain sense. He was against these, newfangled theorists who were corrupters, of the old true faith. But, we can forget his motive. He still laid the groundwork. He I think Mill develops Berkeley's explication of the physical. We see another version of this in Moritz Schlick's essay, Positivism and Realism. A.J. Ayer gives a really great, compact presentation of phenomenalism in language, truth, and logic. Einstein and his physics and reality, it's somewhat influenced by Mach, and he takes what he calls, I believe, the maze of sensations to be primary, and then physical theories are tools to help us navigate this maze of sensations. And then whether a sensation is a hallucination or a representation, this is basically determined by the overall coherence, right? You have a certain belief system which would help you decide whether this sense content is only for me or also for others, right? So I take Einstein to mean perception by representation. So you would have this larger class of experiences that would include both hallucinations and perceptions, and then you would distinguish. You would figure out how to classify a sense experience in terms of the total context and what you already understand about the world, and something that Einstein didn't go into, but you would talk to other people, right? And, I connect this talking to other people to the concept of the forum. You might say that the world is fundamentally a space for assembly, and this is presupposed by the philosopher as such, right? If you adopt this role for yourself, you're not just trying to find out a private belief. You're trying to find out at least beliefs that may be good or valuable for others. Now, some people would say you're pursuing a transpersonal truth. I don't think truth as correspondence to objective reality is actually secure, semantically secure. So I think it's a little bit safer to talk about the construction of beliefs as part of a project of being an ideal believer. So you want your beliefs to have a kind of validity or value or coherence, so that you feel good about yourself as you live into this ego ideal of the scientific or philosophical person. And you also, I think, just as a pure mathematician might want to share a theorem with others, so I think philosophers also try to construct beliefs that they can present to others as an accomplishment.